All right, everybody. Welcome back to Horn Takes, episode 32. I can't believe I've done 32 episodes of podcast. We're live streaming right now on YouTube, live streaming on Facebook. If you happen to jump on, give us a shout. It's Friday. Fridays are always a good day, but this Friday is especially good day for me. Happy day for me because college baseball season's finally started. If you guys don't know, I'm a number one football guy at heart. Played football all throughout school and into college. Played baseball till I was about 12 or 13. Just never really had that much love for baseball as a kid. Part of that was because I just really struggled at the plate. I did well out in the field, and occasionally I would do well at the plate. I just couldn't. I don't know what it was about baseball. It was one of those sports for me where I could go into practice, and with the coach, throwing good pitches, I could hit the ball really well. I'd get in a game and just have no patience. And back then we didn't play 37,000 games of baseball a year. The coaches were like your teacher, somebody's dad. It's a lot different today from a coaching perspective, and it starts really early for these kids. These kids today that play baseball from the time they're like 4 or 5 years old when they get into t-ball, by the time they are in high school, they've had I would argue they've had better coaching and played more games, obviously, but they've had better coaching than most people my age had when they were just playing in high school. It's become that big of a deal for those of you that don't know. But before we get into baseball, we were talking on the show last time about just how cutthroat and tough the SEC is going to be in 2024 when Texas makes that move and Oklahoma makes that move. You're adding two, blue blood type programs. Both programs are sorted down right now from a win-loss perspective, but the rosters have a lot of good players. I think both rosters have the type of players that can go into the SEC and compete. They probably don't have the depth. If you look at their first string guys, they probably have the guys that compete, but probably where the SEC and especially Georgia and Alabama definitely have an edge is in depth. If you watch the national championship game between Georgia and TCU, which I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast, you probably did, Georgia brought in a bunch of dudes at the end of that game that probably could have started at TCU. Like Georgia looked better at the end of that game than they did at the beginning of that game. Anyhow, we were having that conversation, and I made a comment about going to the playoffs for 4 straight years. And I was talking about Michigan. By the time Texas plays Michigan on the road in 2024, it's quite possible that Michigan could be vying for their 4th straight appearance in the college football playoff. And I thought to myself, is that something that's ever happened before? I was pretty sure Alabama did it. So I made a note for myself, and I went back and looked, and I found something very interesting. Bama has gone to 5 straight playoffs. That's their record for times straight to go to the playoffs. Clemson's gone 6 times in a row, and I did not realize that. And I think one of the names that gets missed a lot when we start talking about good coaches, we're always going to talk about Nick Saban. We're always going to talk about Kirby Smart today. You're starting to see, talk about Brian Kelly and, stuff like that. You see, you have like these names that you just always talk about when you talk about good coaches. We very rarely talk about Dabo Swinney. And I don't know if that's like hate towards Dabo Swinney or if maybe he's just not that impressive. To me, going to the playoffs 6 years in a row is impressive. Now, they didn't do near as much damage in those playoffs as Alabama did in those playoffs, but I feel like going 6 straight years means something. And I guess you can make the argument, they're in the ACC. They had a sweet cruise ride to get there. And a lot of that's probably true. Anyways, I wanted to clear that up from the last show. I thought four might have been unprecedented, might not have been unprecedented. I wasn't sure. It's absolutely not unprecedented. Bama's gone 5 times. Clemson's gone 6 times in a row. So now let's get down to it. The meat of the show, Texas baseball starts this weekend. And this is a really cool season for me because I love baseball. I love Texas baseball. But this is like an interesting season because we don't really know what Texas baseball has. We talked on the last podcast, maybe the one before that, about the lineup. 2/3 of the lineup gone. 2/3 of the starting rotation gone. And then we talked about, going back and looking at the roster and seeing where people had played. They played the alumni game a couple of weekends ago. I was able to watch a little bit of that. I was able to watch enough of that to kind of come away with a guess. Here's what I think is going to happen in terms of who's going to play where and maybe what the pitching rotation looks like. And I had all the names right for the pitching rotation, but I had them a little off where they're going to actually start the season out. Anyway, Texas baseball starts the weekend off in the College Baseball Classic. I don't know exactly what it's called. It's in Arlington. They did it last year. I think the year before that, they were in a similar type deal with the SEC, but it was down in Houston at Minute Maid. So for at least the last 2 years, counting this one, they've had this opening weekend type tournament with the SEC, Big 12 and the SEC. And so obviously the SEC's got some good baseball teams, really good baseball teams. Actually, there's a lot of really good baseball teams in the SEC. I would argue that most of the teams in the SEC are even on a national perspective, like really good baseball teams. So Texas is going to have to take that team that lost 2/3 of their rotation, 2/3 of their lineup, and they don't have any time to cry about it. They've got number 8 Arkansas tonight at 7 p.m. That first pitch is again at 7 p.m. It's going to be on Flow Sports. I hate that. It's some online streaming bullshit. And to me, when you look at the teams that go to this type of a deal, I don't know. I don't even understand how Flow Sports wins the TV for that. I don't know all the business side of college baseball, and maybe it's some kind of deal, whoever owns the ballpark at Arlington cut, or and I don't even know. I think they're probably playing at the new one. So maybe the Texas Rangers cut some kind of deal with Flow Sports. I don't know. Anyway, there's going to be a lot of really good games that a lot of people aren't going to want to pay money to watch. So you can find them on the radio. But tonight they've got number 8 Arkansas. So they're going to start right off the bat with a top 10 team. Then they got Missouri on Saturday. I believe that first pitch is at 1:30, 2:30 maybe. And then Vandy at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday. And they're a number 10 team in the country, according to D1 Baseball. So there's no waiting to find out what Texas baseball could be. Now, let's say Texas baseball went in and swept this. That doesn't mean that they're going to be in the College World Series. It doesn't mean they're going to Omaha. But what it does mean is they have the type of players, and these players are players we just don't know about, to compete at a very high level. So it also doesn't mean if they go in and get their ass handed to them in these 3 games that they can't grow and become the type of team that could end up in Omaha towards the end of the season. There's a lot of talent on the roster. They brought in a lot of talent from the transfer portal. And then there was already some guys on campus that are obviously good baseball players. But yeah, they're going to find out real quick where they stand today in the next 3 games. The rotation we talked about, I wanted to say I thought Lucas, I can't remember exactly what I said in the last podcast, but it was these 3 guys, and I'll just tell you where they're at right now. Lucas Gordon's going to be your Friday night guy. Zane Morehouse is going to be your Saturday guy, and then Travis Stale is going to be your Sunday guy today. Now that could change. They've got a lot of transfer pitchers coming in, a lot of young pitchers. They have some really talented guys that were on the roster last year and even the year before that just haven't quite gotten it yet. And I'm talking about some guys that can throw some heat. They've got good off-speed pitches. They're just having a little bit of problem probably with command, confidence, and anybody that's played baseball probably understands that confidence is almost the number one thing you have to have in baseball. You can be a really skilled athlete and have those types of skills that make you a good baseball player, but if you're not confident, none of that comes through and you're not going to play well. So there's your rotation as of today. Catchers, or excuse me, the lineup, and this is not in order of batting order certainly, but this is kind of what the field is going to look like when they run out onto the field tonight. At catcher, you're going to have Galvan or Giametti. We talked about both of those guys. Catchers in college, one of them will be the starter, one of them will play more. But you play so many games in college and you play them in such a short amount of time. Both of those guys are going to see the field. Jared Thomas and the rest of this order we got exactly right. And again, I take no credit for that. It's just what I saw in the alumni game. Jared Thomas at first base, Jack O'Dowd second base, Mitchell Daly at shortstop, Jalen Flores at third base, Dylan Campbell out in right field, Eric Kennedy at center field, and then Porter Brown transfer from TCU out in the left field. So there's kind of your guys to look at this weekend. You won't be able to look at them unless you have Flow Sports, which I don't. I'm real bitter about this. This should be ESPN. There's no way in the world this shouldn't. At the very least, this should be on SEC Network. At the very least, I don't understand. Last year, these games were on Longhorn Network, and at least the Texas ones. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. But unfortunately, college baseball fans, and especially fans of these teams, unless they want to pony up, and I don't know what the Flow baseball, and I think it's only yearly. I don't even think you can pay monthly. I don't know what that costs, but I'm not paying it. I'll listen on the radio as much as I can. So there it is, man. And usually Texas baseball is talking about getting to Omaha. Like that's the goal, right? I don't know. Obviously, I feel like this team can't have that goal, at least not yet. Now, if this team goes in and wins these 3 games, or maybe even takes 2 of 3 of these games, and if they're tight in the game that they lost, even if they're tight in the games that they lose, I think at that point you can kind of say, well, maybe they do have what it takes to compete and be there at the end. We'll just have to see. Texas basketball. Last time we talked about Texas basketball, we talked about that really rough 4-game stretch they went on, starting on the road with Tennessee. They split that. And the last conversation we really had on the show was these next 2 games are pretty pivotal because they're in first place right now. And they're going into those 2 games, they were first place alone. And the opponents they were going to play were not ranked opponents. One of those teams, actually both of those teams, they'd already beaten once this year. And so for me, I was looking at this and saying, these are 2 games that Texas basketball should be able to go and win. Now, one of them was on the road, one of them was at home. And if you've been paying attention to Big 12 basketball and really any ultra competitive basketball in college this year, it's really hard to win on the road. I don't know why that is. I never played organized basketball. I don't know what it is about having to go on the road. Obviously, we're talking about small arenas. A lot of these highly ranked teams are traditional powerhouses and their fan bases are rabid. And I get how that can be totally not easy to play in. But it seems almost like if you're going on the road to play a talented team, you're going to have a tough out. And again, the Big 12 has proven that over and over again this year. So I said for sure, Rodney Terry has got to have his guys ready to play these next 2 games. And if you win these next 2 games, you're in a really good position to hold on to that number 1 spot. You give yourself a little cushion as you progress through the rest of the Big 12 schedule where you have some room for mistakes. You have some rooms to have that letdown game. Maybe you shouldn't, right? So to me, it was really imperative for Rodney Terry to have his guys ready to play. They came out on that Saturday to play West Virginia at home and just absolutely beat the hell out of them. I mean, they looked really good. The final score of that game, I believe, was 94-60. West Virginia was never in that game. Texas looked great. They held onto the ball. There wasn't a lot of turnovers. Uh, they shot well. They defended well. It looked to me like, yeah, Rodney Terry did the job. He had his guys ready to play. They weren't taking it for granted that they'd already beaten West Virginia. I think he had them in the right mindset, and they went out and they executed. And I think that is what Texas basketball fans have been kind of waiting for the team. And let's, West Virginia is not a great team, but they're not a bad team either. And they've got a really good coach, and they've got a decently talented roster. They've got guys that can play. So to me, the measuring stick there was just, you Texas roster wise is obviously better. Go out and execute and prove it. And they did that. And that's all you can do. But I always have a bad feeling. I always had a bad feeling about that Tech game. Anytime Texas comes to Lubbock to play in anything, it's you can just might as well throw the records out the window. You can throw the rosters out the window. You can throw the coaching staffs out none of that shit matters. Texas Tech is going to be ready to play anytime the University of Texas comes to Lubbock for any men's sport. And so I was worried about that, and you looked at what Tech had done the last two home games against ranked teams. They won those games. Tech's record in the Big 12 is abysmal. Their overall record is abysmal. Now, they had some injuries this year that have obviously slowed them down and slowed down the development of that team cohesivity, right? Like, these guys haven't played together that much this year, unfortunately. But they got a lot of those guys back. Now, granted, they were missing some guys in that game Monday night against Texas. But now they go in there and they just don't look good. They look rattled. They're turning the ball over, and they cannot shoot worth a damn. I mean, it was just it was a mess. Marcus Carr led all scorers with 23 for Texas. Dylan Dessou had a pretty decent game offensively, and a good game for him. He scored 11 points in that game. And that was basically it. Tyrese Hunter still can't make a basket. I mean, that dude couldn't buy a basket right now. You had Jabari Rice, who usually is pretty good. Usually Jabari Rice is good for 10, 11, 12, and he'll pop you for 26, close to 30 on a good night. He had a bad night. Arterio Morris, the freshman, athletically super gifted point guard, but he struggled this year offensively. He's trying to find his game. He's really struggled from behind the arc, and that's one of the things as he was getting recruited that he was good at, right? He's a 3 guy. He's a really good shooting guard and a really good, could break defenses down and get the ball underneath the basket and score. And we saw that a little bit against Tech, but not a whole lot for him. So basically, Marcus Carr, from a guard perspective, and we've talked all year, the backcourt for Texas is what drives this Texas basketball team. As they go, the team goes, and they just did not go at all against Tech. And so, Tech got a pretty decent lead. Texas was able to whittle it away and get close again. And then there was like these spurts where they just would give the ball up, and Tech would make them pay. So they dropped that game to Tech. So they split those 2 games. That game against Tech was a pretty big one from a Big 12 championship, regular season championship perspective, because now you look at it, and here's the final 5 games for Texas. They've got OU at home tomorrow. They've got ISU at home early next week. Then they have to go on the road at Baylor. Then they have to go on the road at TCU. And then their final game, they get KU at home. KU's got a good team. And I think the game in Lawrence, I felt like Texas was the better team. I just felt like they went on these overall Texas was the better team is what I felt, but they had these moments where again they would turn the ball over and they would be close and then the score would go from hey we're tied or we're down by 2 to like now we're down by 8 or 10 like in seconds. And I thought that's what really hurt Texas in that game. But you look at the schedule going forward, you got Oklahoma, which their record again is really bad in the Big 12, but they dump trucked Alabama when Alabama was ranked number 1, number 2 in the country. I don't know exactly, definitely top 5. And OU just absolutely skull drug them. So there's ability there, which, by the way, that was a road game for Alabama, I believe. Going back to the conversation about how tough it is to win basketball games on the road in college basketball, especially if you're playing a really good opponent. ISU, Iowa State, that's a good team. Baylor's a good team. TCU is a good team. And obviously KU is a good team. And I feel like Texas, at the very least, like best case, has to win 3 of those 5 games. And they probably need to win 4 of those 5 games to be the regular season Big 12 championship or champion. So that game in Lubbock, again, that was like a man, if we can get this win, we've got sort of that extra game in our pocket type deal. And it's a totally winnable game. And they just didn't perform. And I felt like a lot of that was mental. And what I don't understand about Texas sports teams when they go into Lubbock, like fans will say, "Oh, anytime you go to Lubbock, that's a trap game. Like you got to be ready to play that game." And I've seen fans post that on message board. I've had conversations with fans, and they say that, and I'm like, "You're absolutely right." But at what point do the teams stop looking at this and going, "Oh, this could be a trap game," and just look at it and go, "We better have our shit together because we're going to play Texas Tech in Lubbock." I mean, we've seen it over the year. We've seen really good Texas football teams go into Lubbock against not really good, overall, not really good Texas Tech football teams and lose because it's like they didn't show up. I remember being at a game in 2006 in Jones Stadium. Colt McCoy brings the Texas Longhorns in, and I don't know what they were ranked. They were highly ranked. And they did not play for the first 8 minutes of that game. Literally, it was 21-0 Texas Tech, like in a blink. And Colt McCoy was able to, lead the troops back, and they ended up winning that game. But then you look at like the 2008 game where Texas didn't wake up until halftime and had this massive comeback to eventually take the lead real late in that game. And then we all know the Crabtree play. And if you've ever landed in the airport in Lubbock, you've seen a picture of Mike Crabtree catching a ball. When we moved here, my wife's orientation at University Medical Center, and I'm not shitting you, this was in 2015. So 7 years after that play happened, there was a video of that play in her orientation at University Medical Center. So you have to be ready to come play Texas Tech in Lubbock, especially. It's not going to be easy. And I've talked on the show before about Jones Stadium just having some kind of weird magic about it. And like good teams go there to die. If you don't come in like you're playing the number 1 team in the country, or you're playing for the national championship, or you're playing for your conference show, whatever it is, you're playing in a big game. You should approach any game in Lubbock. If you're the Texas Longhorns, you should approach that game like you're about to play a championship game, because the effort you're going to get out of Tech is a championship type effort. And it is just what it is. It's been happening for years. Why they keep falling into this trap of not being able to handle that, I don't know. I don't get it. Other news, Texas basketball, and this isn't directly related to Texas basketball anymore, but uh, the Travis County DA dropped all the charges against Chris Beard. Part of that was probably because his fiance released that statement that she released saying that she didn't want to press charges and blah 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 and all that stuff. Uh, I still feel like if there was like just this huge body of evidence that made the case for you, that they would still go after that. So I don't obviously I don't work for the Travis County DA. I don't know what standards they have to take a case to trial or to push a conviction or push charges. I don't know any of that. It just seems weird that they, even without her cooperation, didn't feel like they had any kind of evidence that they could take and say, I mean, they didn't even try to scare him. They didn't even try to scare him into a plea deal. They just said, "Man, we don't have anything." Like, and I mean, there could be all kinds of back deal stuff going on. I have no idea. But that was sort of an ending to that. And we talked about, when this originally came out, to me, that was like the best case scenario for Chris Beard, was that he was never going to stay as the head coach at Texas. But his best case scenario would be not having to deal with any of the legal ramifications. And so for Chris Beard, I think he came out of this whole deal about as well as anybody could have expected him to come out of this deal. It'll be interesting to see, what happens with him going forward. Teams, I feel like colleges, especially major colleges, are going to wait, at least 2 or 3 years for this whole thing to completely go away, from the public's eye, from the public's mind, before anybody will even touch him. But he might get a job at a smaller school, a JUCO, something like that. I feel like what's going to end up happening is Chris Beard is going to eventually, and it's going to take him time. I feel like, he's going to have to pay his dues again, but I feel like he's going to end up at another sort of big time job at some point. I don't know. Nobody condones, well, I won't say nobody, but most reasonable, law abiding people don't condone in any way abusing a spouse. And if that's what happened, man, I hope karma, you know, does what it needs to do. And we're not talking about Chris Beard getting to reset his life and move on. But if he didn't, I hope the best for him, and I hope he can and move on and all that. And now maybe Texas basketball can move on. They fired him a few weeks ago, and then this comes out, and now there's really nothing else to talk about from an internal perspective for those Texas basketball players and the coaching staff. So maybe we get to move on from that. And we talked about Tyrese Hunter not being able to buy a bucket earlier. I really feel like he was doing really well, and he was doing really well offensively until this whole Chris Beard stuff came out. And I wonder, a lot of people ask the question, what's going on with Tyrese Hunter? I wonder if part of this process for him has just really messed him up mentally. Maybe Tyrese Hunter came to Texas specifically to play for Chris Beard. Maybe he saw that as an opportunity to play for a guy that he, I don't know what the relationship was, but maybe they had a really good relationship, and maybe he just really liked what Chris Beard had to offer in terms of preparing him for the next level. Imagine being that kid. You transfer out of a place that's got a good basketball program. I'm sure the fans at Iowa State absolutely loved him before he left. They haven't treated him well since, and that's fair play to that, right? But you leave that, he had a super successful year. He's the Big 12 Freshman of the Year. You leave all that behind, and hey, man, he had ties there. I'm sure he was good friends with players there. I'm sure he enjoyed his coaches. Sure, he was treated very well. Like he'd been there a year. He laid down roots. It was his place, and he upped and left. And then a few weeks into your new gig, all that shit happens, and your coach is gone now. And I can imagine situations where, for him that was devastating. And I don't know that he's bounced back from that yet mentally and probably emotionally. And I think that has at least a little bit to do with kind of where he's at on the court. I hope, not just because I'm a fan and he plays for my team, but I really hope that guy can can kind of get it back together. I don't know, regardless of who Texas hires next year, whether they decide to retain Rodney Terry, give him a contract, or whether they bring in somebody else. It would not surprise me to see Tyrese Hunter move on. We talked a little bit last time about some possible SEC scheduling, and I made a comment, that the 2024 SEC schedule for Texas or their 2024 schedule in general is just going to be brutal. They got to go on the road to Michigan, and again we talked about it. Like Michigan could conceivably be going for their fourth straight college football playoff appearance in 2024. They'll certainly be, unless the wheels completely come off and Jim Harbaugh leaves and there's some huge scandal. I mean, there's a lot of good players there. Something major would have to happen for their roster to just not be there. So let's assume Jim Harbaugh stays through at least 2024. They're going to have a good team. That's going to be a tough road game. And then we talked a little bit about like what this, how does the SEC handle 16 teams? And there's been all this talk about the pods and whether they should do divisions or scrap divisions or whatever the case may be. There's all this conversation about it, and I saw something really interesting. I'm gonna try to throw it up here on the stream. Hopefully, you guys can see that. Someone sent this to me. It was just kind of like a mock SEC schedule type deal, and we talked on the show last time about this 3-6 deal. Like you're going to play 9 teams in the SEC. 3 of those teams are going to be what they call traditional rivalries, and you're going to play those teams every year. And then the schedule breaks down. 6 of the other 12 SEC teams or games. And the way this deal has them set up, they're like pods almost. Like if you look at Texas is here, obviously A&M, OU, Arkansas are their traditional rivalries. I would be super shocked if that's not the 3 teams that Texas plays every single year. The only other one that might make sense is LSU because they're right next door, but there's really no rivalry there. And I don't see which team out of OU, Arkansas, and A&M that you say, we'd rather see LSU play Texas every year. So there's probably no way I could be more surprised ever about anything if that doesn't happen, at least. But then you look at this first pod for Texas, and it's Alabama or Georgia, meaning every other year you're going to play Alabama or Georgia. Then you got Auburn. I can't tell who that is because of my sweet sunglasses. Oh, Auburn or Florida. Then you got UK or Mizzou. Then you got LSU or Tennessee. You got Ole Miss or Mississippi State, then Vandy or South Carolina. So in any given year, and I don't know, like if you start here at Alabama, if you're seeing this right now on the stream, or if you watch this again on YouTube, you'll see there's like a lower level and an upper level to each box. And I don't know if like the white wedge is one schedule, or if the blue wedge is one schedule. Who knows what that looks like? But man, there is going to be just some, like, if you survive the SEC, it's a damn good thing. I'll just put it like this. It is a damn good thing that the playoffs are expanding to 12 in 2024, because outside of Alabama, Georgia, I don't think there's 2 teams in this conference, or 2 teams that'll be in this conference in 2024. They're going to be able to get through some of these schedules without just being beat the hell up. I mean, we talk about showing up. Like, you're going to have to show up every single week just about in this 2024 SEC. One of the interesting ones I looked at was Auburn. I feel like Auburn just got absolutely hosed. And again, this is just a mock thing. Who knows if this is what it really looks like? But let's assume that whoever built this is the scheduler for the SEC, and this is what's going to happen. Auburn has as traditional rivals Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi State. They have Tennessee and OU as a box, meaning we'll play Tennessee or we'll play OU every other year. They have Texas and LSU as a box, meaning we'll play Texas or LSU every. If this happens, there is no way Auburn will ever win another SEC championship. I'm just going to put that out there. There's no way. Bama and Georgia every single year, no matter what. And then you've got two blocks of either Texas LSU, OU Tennessee. So I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like, and I don't know what it's going to look like for certain teams. I'm interested. I'm excited to see what that's going to look like. This whole move to the SEC for Texas fans like it. We're excited about it. The Big 12 under the previous leadership they just didn't it just didn't seem like they were interested in doing anything to make the Big 12 better. And they had opportunities. When Texas A&M left and Colorado left and Nebraska left, they had opportunities to really try to find a way to expand and build do what they did with the Big 12 originally and do it again. And they just didn't do it. And they had opportunities in the past to, have a Big 12 network, and they just didn't want to do it. And so I felt like the leadership for the Big 12 for so long has been stagnant and been so, politically against Texas and so politically against Oklahoma that these two schools had no choice. And I don't know what the details of the conversations or negotiations, or at some point someone reached out to someone and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I kind of feel like it would have been Texas and OU originally having conversations and them going to the SEC and saying, "Hey, what do you guys think about this?" I really don't think the SEC, and I could be wrong, I really don't think the SEC would go and poach like that. I know the Big 12 really thought they did. I don't know though. I don't work in any of these conferences. I don't know the politics of all that. I don't know the unwritten rules. I don't even know what the real rules are. My assumption would be it'd be frowned upon for the SEC to reach out to two schools in a different conference and say, "Hey, let's get this going." But maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, we're excited about it. We're ready to go do it. But god dang, it's going to be tough. Football is going to be tough. Baseball is going to be tough. Basketball, you just built like the super conference. I, I mean, again, all three of those men's sports are going to be absolutely brutal to get out of and be the champion. And football looks tough, right? Like, obviously, but I think maybe baseball and basketball are even tougher. So I'm excited about seeing what these schedules look like. I like the layout of this schedule, the three rivalry things, and I'm perfectly fine with Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas A&M every year. I mean, I don't know what else you would do if you're the SEC. And then I like the idea of playing one or two of these other boxes, so to speak, every year, every other year. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm excited for the road trips. I think there's just going to be some really epic football weekends to come for Texas football fans, for Oklahoma football fans, for SEC football fans, for SEC football fans that are also fans of teams that are in the SEC, individual teams, and they're not just SEC fans. I think the football is going to be really fun, and the baseball is going to be really good, and the basketball is going to be really, really good. Deuce Robinson update. So we talked a few shows ago. And by the way, I'm probably going to just do one show a week for a while. Maybe when baseball kind of picks back up again and we get closer to March Madness, maybe then we'll, tournament time. Maybe we'll do a couple a week. But right now, I just don't feel like there's a whole lot of content. There's just not a whole lot of stuff to talk about with Texas sports right now for me. Now I know softball's going. I know ladies basketball's going. I just don't follow women's softball, and I don't follow. Well, I follow the softball a little bit. It's hard to follow it though. It's just not on a lot. But the women's basketball game, I'm not super interested in that. So I don't really follow them. So I'm going to follow mostly the men's sports. And so that's what I'm going to mostly talk about is the men's sports. So we'll probably do one show a week. I don't know when I'll do it. I know I'm live streaming at like some random weird time on a Friday afternoon. There's probably 0 people watching the stream. That's okay. We'll figure all that out. But we talked a few shows ago about Deuce Robinson and Texas getting in on that recruitment. We had Mike Roach from Horns 247 on the show. We asked him, "Hey man, what do we think is the probability here? How's Texas looking with Deuce Robinson?" If you don't know who Deuce Robinson is, he's probably like the best tight end in the country in his class. He's ranked as the best tight end in the country in his class. He's out of Arizona. Really outstanding football player. He's a top 40 high school baseball player prospect, top 50 maybe. I don't know what that projects from a draft perspective, but he's a good baseball player. He's a good athlete. And he's been a Georgia slash USC guy for a long time. And then late, Texas kind of got in and made some headway. And it, there were times when you said, it's always kind of been Georgia, USC, and then Texas, once they got into it, was kind of right below that. But there were times when a lot of people felt like, man, Texas is really making some headway. Like they might actually land this guy. And then, of course, he delayed his pick. He was supposed to sign on National Signing Day, and I think he made a good decision there because I think he's trying to figure out what does baseball look like for him. One of the reasons I feel like Texas got in on the recruitment with him and was able to make up so much ground is because of Texas's baseball program and their tradition. I think that was something that was appealing to him. So I think that opened him up to conversations with Texas. And so again, I think that's probably what even got Texas in the picture. But now I think you got to think about it for him and say, if he's that good of a high school baseball player, there's a possibility. I don't know how strong it is. I don't know the kid at all. There's a possibility he may not ever play college football. He may get drafted high enough to play baseball that he's like, I'm gonna go try this baseball deal. I don't know. Uh, I liked to play baseball when I was a kid. I loved to play football when I was a kid. So if I had to make that choice, to me, it would be simple. I'd go play football. But there's a lot of kids that have the opposite feeling. They really love baseball. They like the opportunities they have in baseball. So there's a lot of different directions this thing could go. I don't necessarily think that's what's going to happen, but it's a possibility people need to start thinking about. Deuce Robinson may not play college football, and if he does, it may not be for a few years after he's gone and tried to make baseball his profession. But what I think he did is he said, "I'm going to wait till this draft thing and see how that pans out." Because if he gets drafted high enough, he can sign and he's going to get some money, and he can probably sign a contract with the team that says, "We'll pay for your school." That's what Ricky Williams did with the Phillies out of high school, and he can go play football and not eat up a scholarship wherever he goes. If he plays college football, I think Texas is done in that recruitment. I just a lot of the plugged in recruiting guys that cover Texas football just think he's done, or it's just not going to be a thing. Now that was a little bit before Monken decided he was moving on. I don't know how much sway that will have on him one way or the other. But I'll just say this. I don't think Deuce Robinson is going to end up at Texas. So we won't talk about Deuce Robinson anymore unless he pulls a fast one on us all and decides he's just going to be a pro baseball and he's not even going to play college football, or he ends up at Texas. Then we'll talk about him a lot. But that's your Deuce Robinson update. You guys subscribe to the podcast. You can find it anywhere you find podcasts. You can go to my Buzzsprout. Horn Takes Podcast at buzzsprout.com, I believe is the link. Find the podcast. Subscribe there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's at Horn Takes. Put up all these videos. Go live all the time on there. Do shorts. Find me on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, at Horn Takes. Sorry. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your comments, questions, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good Friday. Welcome.